Behalf of my co-leader, Jesse Rader, thank you for joining us for the Advancement Tableau User Group session. The session is simple but not basic, avoiding the pumpkin spice latte of dashboard designs. I know we have like really strong feelings about pumpkin spice. I think most people do, but there could be some folks out there who like pumpkin spice. So no disrespect. I've never actually had a pumpkin spice latte, so maybe it's delicious. I don't know, but a lot of people are very, very upset about those things. But I think this title is perfect in describing our featured guests' presentation. And just going through the agenda, thank you all for joining. Whether you are a first-time attendee or those I've seen before, all are welcome. Whether you've used Tableau for many, many years, or you just started, or you're just curious about data analytics, this is the place to be. It's a supportive environment. We have a LinkedIn group, and we're always looking for speakers to share their wisdom with the rest of us. What I love about Tableau is there's always something to learn, and especially around data visualization in general. So we'll be passing it on to Paul in a minute. We'll have a Tableau raffle at the end with a chance to win a $100 gift card. And I will now, I'm really excited. Like his presentation spoke to me. Like this is really, really important, I think, in the world of data visualization. So Paul, I will hand it over to you for your presentation. Thank you. Oh, I think you may be muted, Paul. Let's see here. One moment, folks. Doesn't, maybe, sorry, we're having some technical difficulties here.
Oh, I found it.
Ah, okay, it's not Zoom, so it's everything is who moved my cheese. Okay,
exactly.
Thank you.
This is exactly the problem.
There's like some weird orientation that has to happen. All right, hand it over to you. Thanks, Paul.
Great, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And obviously, I want to thank Tableau and the Higher Education Users Group for inviting me to share this with you. You know, as Ron said, simple doesn't have to mean basic. And really what I want to remind you of is, before we get started, is everything that you're seeing today is the result of a team. We're very fortunate at Michigan that we're able to work with a great group of people, that we're all able to work with one another in a way that amplifies each other's skills. We drive ourselves to think differently, and ultimately with the goal of delivering tools and resources that our clients, our frontline fundraisers, can use every day. And we also press ourselves to be innovative. But again, we also have to remember that these dashboards that we develop are not meant for us, they're meant for clients. So we have to meet those expectations. So with that, let's get started. So we're here to build dashboards, right? But before we begin there, let's take a moment and think about some context of what we're doing and how and why. I like to think that traditionally, we're considered organizational historians. Typically, when we talk about reporting and data, really what we're talking about is history. In our work, we generate any number of reports. You know, we tell fundraisers not just what they've done, but we tell them how they've done it. We gauge their performance, we generate metrics for them. Basically, we're telling the story of their successes and the impact that they've had. But quite honestly, that isn't enough anymore. Because what we know is that strategy and planning, that's what really drives our success. So as those needs change, really so does our work and how we do it. So our goal is to strive to be futurists. Our goal is to be our client's guide. In order to be successful, we recognize that we have to help people plan. We have to be able to see into the future. So in this way, we can develop strategies and efficiencies that allow our fundraisers to be as effective as they possibly can be, always with an emphasis on being donor-centric. But we need to be able to create a map of upcoming activities. It's important for us to be able to tell our fundraisers not just what they've done and what they've accomplished, but perhaps more importantly, help them understand what's ahead for them. This is how we see possibilities and opportunities. So what do we do? So, like all of us, we build visualizations. What you're looking at on the screen is our metrics dashboard on the left. And this is our historical dashboard. This is our accomplishments dashboard. But on the right, you'll see our My Fundraiser Plus dashboard. And this is our future-focused planning tool. What we're doing by combining these two core dashboards is providing not just history, but that insight, that roadmap for the future. We're understanding and recognizing history and success, but what we're also doing is developing a cadence of effective planning for the future. By bundling these two dashboards together, we can make actionable intelligence less of a goal and more of a defined reality. And again, we're fortunate. What we know through the rollout of these two dashboards is that we have a dramatic sense of acceptance within our user base. It's not just a way for our fundraisers to manage their portfolio of prospects and donors, but also a way for them to better manage their time and their workflow. And as happens in often cases where success is a great thing, but two things also happen. The first is that we end up building a ton of dashboards. Everybody wants a dashboard. Every report wants to be visualized. Every user wants to see Excel files in this new format, which is a great problem to have. So we see ourselves building dashboards for everything, it seems. The second thing that happens, however, is we get fancy. We're not content anymore with basic pie charts or stacked bar charts. Instead, we start to try to explore esoteric visualizations that are really cool to look at, but the question is are they effective? So what happens when we do these two things? Frankly, our users become overwhelmed. With so many choices, with so many dashboards and views out there, our users don't know where to begin. Much less, they're not really leveraging the insights we provide because it's not clear and understandable to them without spending more time than they have to develop that knowledge base. So what do we do? How do we prevent this from happening? Well, the first thing to do is to take a step back. Here at Michigan, and I think universally, we value the importance of getting to know our audience. We understand and appreciate that our clients, in our case, our fundraisers, they're not data people, they're relationship people. Information is not their destination. Really, information for them is a means to an end. So how do we address this? Well, we begin by focus grouping them. We spend a lot of time with our clients and our fundraisers iterating design. We work with them on the design of our dashboards. We test with them. We roll out new ideas and we partner with them. More importantly is that we listen to what they want as well as remind them of what they need. And when we have this basis of information, from there, here at Michigan, we adopt a two-prong approach. First is we focus on intentional simplicity. I'd encourage you to take a look at the example of the airplane cockpit. Every dial, screen, knob, and button is important, but only if you know how to use them, only if you're an expert. They're almost assuredly going to confuse a non-expert or a casual user. So instead, we focus on streamlining. We create layered views that emphasize intentional simplicity. We show people what they need to know at a high level and allow them to dig deeper and deeper into the details depending on what they want to know. next thing that we do is that we work to reduce friction. And when we talk about friction, what we're talking about is user experience friction. We know that if we can reduce the number of clicks and screens that a user has to flow through, it makes them easier for them to do the work that needs to be done. We understand that user interface friction can be a leading cause for users in terms of not just using the tools that are available to them, but also to understanding and applying the information that's held within those tools. By reducing this friction, the clicks and the screens that a user has to navigate, we are not only encouraging adoption, but also increasing our understanding. So with that, I want to lead us to a real simple example. The bottom line is what we've found, and I'm going to bet that your users would tell you the same thing, is that they want simplicity. So what you're looking at here is a really simple starting point. This is very much a version 1.0, if you will. We listened to our users, and what they told us was that they were confused. They didn't know where tools were or what resources were available for them. They told us that they wanted one place where they could go and get what they needed. They needed it to be simple. They needed it to be portable. We wanted to deliver something from our perspective that we could control, that we could update without a reliance on other teams or intranets or software solutions. So we developed this extremely simple yet very well accepted portal. And this is just a beginning. So I'm going to go ahead and click into this, and we're going to talk about what this does and where it leads. And more importantly, we're going to talk about My Fundraiser Plus, which is the focus of today's conversation. When we go to this dashboard, what we tried to do was to combine the core things that our clients needed. And again, that's that historic perspective, our metrics dashboard, our My Fundraiser Plus, which is our future forward piece, Dart, which is our CRM database, along with Team Dynamics, which is our help desk ticketing system, our internal team website, our business objects reporting solution, and then a university level intranet site. And we'll talk more about this blank space later on. But again, what our users wanted to do is they just wanted to be able to click on something and get taken directly to where they wanted to be. What this allows them to do is to eliminate a group of bookmarks or favorites and be able to focus on one particular screen. So what we're going to do is, I'm hoping that everybody can see this screen, and if not, please let me know, is we're going to focus on My Fundraiser Plus.
So just real quick, you're showing your PowerPoint?
Oh, let's go here.
There we go. Perfect.
Okay. So when we switched over from that screen, that portal, you should now be seeing My Fundraiser Plus. And again, what we do with this dashboard is to be able to illustrate a consistent design language. And we call this our layer cake approach. I joked with Ron earlier that how many times does someone ask you, how are you doing? Did you have a good weekend? And really they want to hear is, yep, I had a great weekend. It was busy. I did a lot of chores. I went to a football game, whatever the case might be. They want that high level answer. And then depending on how deeply they're going to probe, they might want to know, oh, you went to a restaurant. What did you have? Did you like it? How was it prepared? And down that list. But you don't start that first answer of how was your weekend with that detailed look. And that's the approach we take to our dashboard designs. So we always start with an overview summary and then a distillation of what's on that overview, depending on how detailed you want to get. You'll notice on this dashboard that we preserve a lot of white space. We intentionally cut down on any verbiage that you might see on a dashboard with explanations. In our business objects example, and maybe you experience this in your own reporting tools as well, we often refer to the terms and conditions page. That page where we define each cell or column, where we describe and define each input that's required or each core concept, we realize is that takes up a lot of room, and quite frankly, people stop looking at it. So what we knew is we had to develop a way to be able to display core definitions, but only on an as-needed basis. And what we decided upon was this use of icons. What we did is we realized that our icons serve two purposes. They're wayfinding. So anytime you're in a dashboard and you see a particular icon, you know what it relates to, even if you without having to look at the screen itself. It also provides you with some core definitions about the information that you're looking at. So when I say this dashboard refers to upcoming activity, and perhaps you're not quite sure what's included, you can always, for a refresher, hover over this tool to be able to see it. Of course, we include some basic segmentation tools where we talk about time period activity, and we also include some core segmentation tools around ultra high net worth, which is a way for us to filter out our premier or top tier prospects, and then also narrowing by capacity band. And this relates to whether or not we're talking about customers to an organization or donors to a university or other philanthropic organization. And then, as in most visualizations, we have a stack bar chart. It's very simple, but it's effective because it's color-coded. It's large enough that people can see what's happening. And then we put the color key at the bottom. And again, we let Tableau's flexibility so that if I'm at a fundraiser and say, it looks like November is a very busy month for me and I want more details, obviously I can click on that November heading and I can see the list beneath it. So in one screen, I can quickly ascertain, what do I have happening in November? And if I want more detail, I can see it here. But this is that first example of cutting friction down. If I don't remember Curtis's phone number, what I can do is I can click on Curtis's name and I can go directly into their constituent page in our database. This is important because what it does is it stops a user from having to remember to open a second tab to open the database. They don't have to copy a name and then paste it into a search box. They don't have to remember a spelling or a lookup ID. They don't have to filter through multiple Jane Smiths or John Does. This takes them exactly to where they want to be, and it cuts down the need for those click activities. So this is an important piece. The other thing that we introduced on this page is, remember when we talked about the idea of being able to tell someone, your client, what do they have upcoming? And while that's great, we also listened to our fundraisers that said they needed help prioritizing of what I have upcoming, or is there anything that I'm missing? And so we're taking a first pass with this by having this prompted section that we call take action. And in other words, what we looked at was a basic idea around what are some key criteria that our clients should be aware of that are not fulfilled for the members of their prospect pool. And we said, these are, if you see a name listed here, these are people who require immediate attention based on the criteria defined. So this helps that laser focus, and again, narrowing that focus and helping a fundraiser make effective decisions of what to do next. And we further emphasize this list when we see this gold dot next to a name. This tells us that they're an ultra high net worth or premier prospect. And this means that if I'm going to focus on any one individual, before I do anything, I really better be able to go in and make some updates related to this individual. So as I said, when we look at this, we know that this is that overview, and we want to dig deeper. So I'm going to walk you through some of these additional pages and highlight some of the ways that we do that. Our next tab is our tagged and referred prospects. Our tagged and referred prospects, we utilize tags or affiliation tags, hashtags, if you will, around our individual prospects and constituents in our database. And every fundraiser has a variety of those affiliation tags that they can apply. And so when we populate that list, it's very dependent upon whether or not the fundraiser has any tags applied. But where we utilize this as a tool, and we're going to specifically focus on, is if I want to talk about referrals, prospects that someone has referred to me. So if I'm sitting with my manager and my manager says, all right, if you could pick, a couple of places where you can have the most impact and I need you to really focus on growing or adding new people to your portfolio, where would that be? I can see geographically where my prospects or where I have folks tagged, but what I can further do then is apply that tag, that PDA referral, and now I can see that if I'm going to go someplace to do that, I really need to be in Texas and I need to be in Florida. And again, what I'm seeing beneath it is that list of who those individuals are and some core information that's going to help me make some additional decisions. But as I said, again, with reducing that friction, I can click on a name, and along with being able to go to that constituent record in the system, I now also have the option to click through this second link and go directly to our ticketing system and make an update and request an update be made to that referral. So again, for example, I met with John Mayers, and John Mayers isn't somebody who's really a good prospect for us. I need to end date that referral. By clicking on this link, it allows me to take care of that and make that request immediately. Along with this, as I said, we can do some additional work, and we can stack our segmentation. So if I really wanted to focus on just the southern states, which is an overlap for these referrals, but we can see that as well. We can also apply some other core filters along the side. Again, the design of the page is always meant to have that graphical interface at the top, kind of from that old newspaper language of above the fold, and then beneath it, we have the detail list that we want to peruse. And here again, we see this when we talk about those icons and the definition that's here, we utilize that as well. The next tab that I want to talk to you about is our asks tab. And you can think about asks, if you're in higher education, you might call those proposals, opportunities, asks, or you can think about it in terms of outstanding contracts if you're in a non-fundraising perspective. Here, this screen initially will load and it'll look like a big eye chart. And I'm gonna reduce the number of fiscal years just to help for a second. And we'll come back and I'll explain why it's more detailed and it extends further into the past. Here we take a look at this. And one of the things that we learned when we talked to our fundraisers and we looked at our own internal results is that not every open or outstanding ask is treated the same way. And not every ask should have the same strategy in terms of closing it. So what we looked at is we said, first, can we understand the data better? So we looked at a time period and we looked at our previous campaign. We looked at a 7-year snapshot and we were able to determine how quickly asks close. And we know that a successful ask, over 85% of those asks, near 90%, if they're going to close successfully, do so within 120 days. Of course, the caveat here is that if it is a very complicated funding opportunity, or if it's a very, very large funding opportunity, that time period may be extended. But for the overwhelming majority, if that ask is going to be accepted, it will happen within 120 days. So what we wanted to be able to provide our fundraisers with is that sense of timing so that fundraisers could then change their strategy around the steps they would take to help a prospect make that decision and ultimately accept that ask. So we go to the top and we see that icon and we can see that how we've segmented our asks. We've talked about these are upcoming asks. These are asks that we plan to make. We have lapsed asks. Again, we're emerging. We're still emerging from the shadow of COVID. There are many times where we thought we were going to do something and circumstances changed. So we needed that reminder of these are things we said we were going to do, but things have changed and we need to go back and make sure that they're still relevant and let's carry them through. So let's highlight those. And then we talk about, here's where we talk about that segmentation. New asks. These are asks that are in the first 90 days. This is when everything still has that new car smell and that new car shine. The fundraiser's excited. They're, this prospect's at the, at the center of their focal point. The prospect is excited and eager. And if it's going to close in that 90 days, they're going to have one strategy. But then what happens is as things start to age in that 90 to 120 days, where we talk about those recent asks, this is when that shine starts to dull a little bit. Little dust starts to settle. Our fundraisers are focused on new prospects. If a prospect hasn't said yes, maybe their intentions have changed. What would we do differently? If I'm trying to understand and look at my outstanding asks, what different resources can I rely upon or can I recruit to help me that would be different than something that happened, within that first week? And then finally, we get to those aging asks. These are asks that are over 120 days old. We have one more Hail Mary shot at closing these asks. What's the last step that I can take to see if I can make this happen? And what we can do then is, by understanding this timeline, we can decide at what point do we bring different people or different ideas to that timeline, so that we're not overlapping or we're not jumping the gun. We do show accepted asks here, and we do this for one reason in particular. By showing accepted asks, we can make sure that there are follow-up or stewardship activities being taken. And that's why there's the long tail of accepted asks shown. And then finally, we show rejected asks here. And we do this specifically because our fundraisers wanted a reminder of asks where someone said no, so they can make a determination as to whether was it the amount that was wrong, was it a lack of interest, do we not have the right assessment of what they were interested in? What can we do to change that no to a yes? So we wanted to highlight those. The next thing you'll see is our large exclamation point. This is our first experiment with what we're calling passive alerts. We realize that we want to get better about our fundraisers, providing them with dynamic alerts. But before we do that, before we start pinging with emails and messages and directed messages, let's begin in a passive way. So now we're calling out instances or exceptions. So instances where an ask doesn't have a planned date, we put an exclamation point next to it. It's our fundraiser's way to see that as attention is needed on this particular line item. Again, those aging asks, those ones that are over 120 days, or those lapsed asks that we said we were going to make, but we haven't gotten around to. And then finally, those accepted asks, and we say this very cumbersomely, accepted asks without a post-ask interaction. In other words, the prospect has become a donor, but we haven't actually worked with them to thank them and recognize that gift in an appropriate fashion. So this is the reminder to do that. It's a lot of time spent on these two icons, but they're very important when we look at this view, because we see a variety of different colors. We see a legend. We see those definitions. And again, we see that list that's beneath here, along with those filters across the top always. Here again, if I click on, let's say, a particular line item, not only can I go to the specific constituent, but here I can go specifically to that particular ask, that particular plan. And this is important because we know that many of our donors are multi-year donors. They have supported us over the years, and they may have a long list of these plans that are in the system for us. So by being able to point a fundraiser directly to that plan and directly to that ask, it saves them time. So again, it gets back to that idea of reducing friction. One of the things that you'll also notice in this particular top line is we have this column that's number of days since an ask. And you'll see this is a negative number. So the first thing we see is that this is an upcoming ask, and we have a negative number. What this is designed to help us understand is how many days has it been since an ask was made? What we're saying in this column with a negative number is that it's 254 days until that ask is due. We've employed this idea of a NASA countdown clock, where it's T minus 10, 9, 8, etc. And this allows a fundraiser, as time is decremented, to ask themselves, Have they aligned the right resources? Have they made travel plans when necessary? Have they booked hotels? Do they have materials that they're going to need? Have they requested due diligence if it's required? All of these things, by seeing that time block at the top of the right there and decrementing all the time, it gives them that sense of planning. In the same way we see these nulls, this tells us that these are the asks where we know that that ask does not have a date. We see it listed as null. And we can scroll through it. And here we see, again, by looking at this and saying, we see some aging asks. It's been 145 days since this ask was made. It's still in a response pending status. What's our Hail Mary effort going to be? And here we have some accepted asks. And here's an example of an ask that was accepted 5 days ago, but we have not yet met with that donor to interact with them in a way that reinforces our thanks for their gift. And so by using these passive alerts, a fundraiser can quickly scan and see if there are areas where they need to make updates or where they're on track. So I hope this makes sense. I'm going to keep going, and then when we're finished with a couple of these additional tabs, I'm going to open it up to questions because I certainly want to be able to address those. We employ a lot of the same theory on this next tab when we think of upcoming visits. Again, we see the icon, we see what types of activities are shown here. We also see that we have an alert. And the alert is anytime we see an upcoming ask where the date has passed. So in other words, again, that idea of we said we were going to do this, but for whatever reason, we've had to delay it, it hasn't happened, or I simply haven't updated the system. So same idea, stacked bar chart, very simple. We keep our color coding and our ability to segment by clicking on either the type or also the month. We also show a list of all the prospects that are listed here. And in a high level view, how many visits do we have planned with each individual? So I can see, oh, I have multiple visits planned with a couple of folks. Down below, again, I have the detail that's related to that overview. And here, if I elect, I can click on not only the prospect, but I can go to that specific activity if I need to make an update, or if I need to add additional, if I need to change plans, if I need to change a date, whatever the case might be, I can toggle between those two. Here's an example where you can see the exclamation points. The exclamation point tells me that these are things that were supposed to happen but have not yet happened. And here we can start to see the future forward ones where they're just showing by color and they're telling us that they're upcoming. So this is another example of using a passive alert. As I said, these passive alerts we think of this as version 1. Eventually we'll look at how do we deploy these alerts in a more prompted fashion. One other area that I'd like to focus on for us today is this idea of working with our portfolio. A couple of things that happen with our fundraisers, and you may experience this as well, is our fundraisers will say, I manage, in this case, 67 households. And my boss says to me, I can visit 5 of them. Who will I see? So of course, then comes the fun part of, how do I sort this? Do I sort this by name? Do I sort this by the date that I last visited them? Do I sort this by where I am geographically? Is that really the important segment? How do we help fundraisers make that decision of how they can process their work effectively? So in this case, before we get started, I want to take a minute again to say when we talk about engagement, whether a prospect is engaged, we list that criteria behind the icon. We show what that overall engagement score is. And by using that color coding, we can see in the list below whether or not a prospect is considered engaged or not. Yes, we have it listed in a text field, but we can also see it visually. But again, going back to that scenario where my boss says to me, I can see 5 people, who's it going to be? So what I would say is I'm going to look at my portfolio, and the first question I'm going to ask it is do they have an expired visit? So I'm going to say yes. So of those 67 households, 33 of them have an expired visit. The next thing I'm going to ask is, are they ultra high net worth prospects? Remember we talked about that idea of premier prospects. So here I'm going to apply ultra high net worth. I'm down to 14. And I'm going to further segment that list, and I'm going to focus on just the very top tier of those prospects. 7. What I can do now is I've taken that list in just a matter of really 4 clicks. I've been able to distill that list of 67 households down to 7 households that I need to visit, and especially given that opportunity to only visit 5. And I can very quickly now make that determination. And I can say to my manager, I need to see these people because they're ultra high net worth prospects. They're at the top of my portfolio. They haven't been visited in a year. And here's that list, and here's here's what I want to make happen. And then we can have that conversation as to which of the, if I want to distill this down even further. But this is an example of how we can take a tool. This would not be possible in our Blackbaud CRM instance. You would have to run a separate report and use an Excel file and do multiple sorts and cuts and pastes to be able to get to this. Here we're able to do it in a screen dynamically, and we're able to do it much more effectively. The other thing that we can look at, quite frankly, is we can look at this and say, here's a prospect that I've managed for 42 months that has never been visited. And so maybe I realize, you know what? In actuality, I've tried to meet with this household 7 times, and I cannot get them to commit to a visit. So rather than go to the constituent, here I have the ability to click on that second link, and that will allow me to request that this prospect be removed from my portfolio or transferred to another fundraiser. Again, this type of functionality would have taken a lot more effort to do in another format. We do have a couple other tabs, and one is related to CRM, which looks very similar to the Manage Portfolio tab. What I'd like to do is to stop the stop this piece of the session and give an opportunity to talk about questions.
Great. Just wanted to know we do have a question out there from Haiti in how to define the premier prospects.
So our premier prospects are our ultra high net worth prospects. And our research team really works to focus based on, they have to have a capacity over $3 million to be able to be considered an ultra high net worth prospect. And then there are additional fuzzy criteria that goes into that rating as well.
We had another question in the Q&A from Karen. She said, it's very practical. You mentioned at the start that your team does quite a bit of user acceptance testing discussions to ensure you're showing them what they need. Can you walk us through what that looked like for this dashboard, or even just one tab of this dashboard?
So typically we start out with a theory, so we knew what we wanted to create. We knew that what we wanted to do is again, we look at and say, through conversations, we listen and we say, okay, what are fundraisers interested in? They're interested in this forward-facing piece. So then we start to ask people, like, what do you want to see from an upcoming perspective? What are the things that you're looking for? What are the attributes that you're focused on? And then we'll mock something up, and then we'll bring it in. And we always believe that in the past, we'd say, oh, let's bring everybody in a room and let's let everybody ideate. And we realize that unstructured, by not giving something to react to, people couldn't quite find a point of traction or a foothold. So what we'll do is we'll mock up a screen, and we'll say, these are what we're thinking about added. These are the fields. And we'll use like a large whiteboard, or now virtually we'll use a Jamboard where we'll have it designed, and we'll say, we'd like you to drag and drop where you think things would make sense to see. Show us what you'd want to see. Show us where you think that you'd want to visit them. And then once we have that designed, then what we'll do is we'll go out and we'll develop that page. We'll go back to that first round of participants, that focus group, and then we'll expand beyond that. So I'd give you a really good example. When we first started this quest with our, like very early on with our metrics dashboard, we went through that process repeatedly. We'd go through tab by tab with different groups of individuals, and then we would focus group with various users. But it's important to not focus group only with your best users or your high-performing fundraisers. We also targeted our difficult users. We targeted people who were very resistant to change. In fact, one of our most strident advocates was self-identified as the lowest common denominator from a technology perspective. He would just flat out tell you he doesn't like technology, he doesn't like the system. And I remember very clearly that we were in a meeting. He was a chief development officer. We were in a meeting with other chief development officers and our senior leadership. And the senior leadership was presenting some information on a screen that was in an Excel file, very confusing, very hard to understand. And this individual, again, the person who we label as change resistant, raised his hand and just said, you know what? None of us can understand what you're showing us. We'd really like to see what we saw in the demonstration that Paul has worked with us on in the past. And that was the moment that we knew that we had succeeded, because we had people asking for the views that made sense to them, that they had rejected the old way of seeing things in that very spreadsheet heavy or tabular view. So our focus is always to take a look at that, to partner with our fundraisers, have these sessions. We have them as one-on-ones in small groups, and then these rollouts over time. I hope that answered the question. And again, I would just say that, you know, the big question that I would have is this successful? And I would tell you, yes, it is very successful. We know that our dashboards are among the most used dashboards within the university in terms of volume in views. We know that our clients, our fundraisers, and their support teams use these tools more frequently than they use the Blackbaud CRM. In fact, these are subscribed tools. If there is any error, like on a Monday, if our data warehouse is down or if it doesn't refresh, this is what they ask about, not about whether or not they can enter data into the system. And I do want to take a minute to say that we also think about these dashboards depending on user behavior. Most of the time, our clients are looking to consume information. And these dashboards are much easier to consume information than it is through our database. Our database is designed to be fed. It's designed to be, you know, data to be entered into. So while paving the way or simplifying the way for that to happen through the dashboards, we still make it easier for that consumption. And again, I would tell you that, you know, we're working on a couple of new things right now, and that's why the bottom half of that one screen was blank, is we have two very detailed dashboards that are more along that prompted activity, again, moving past passive into prompted behaviors that will soon occupy the bottom half of that screen.
That's perfect. I think we had a question about what's on tap for your next set of dashboards, or what's something you wish you could show that you can't.
So the two that we're working on is, one of them is we're calling them, like, you know, we think about, for those of you who are in the philanthropic industries, we always talk giving life cycle or giving stages. So what we're going to do is we're working on creating prompted stages. How do we use activities and time boxes to chart a prospect's journey through those stages and ensure that activities are taking place on a timely basis? How do we ensure that we're showing that demonstrated progression, and at the same time surfacing instances or exceptions where they need additional support? So this will be based, as I said, on some, right now we're taking first stabs at what we think those time boxes are. We, again, through a lot of meetings with fundraisers, have really worked to define what those milestones are for each of those stages. Because, you know, you'd think like, oh, this is pretty basic. But when you're starting to get to that discrete level of activity, not so much. And, you know, so now as we think about what the time boxes are associated with each activity within each stage, we're working to do that so we can prompt fundraisers and allow them to be more effective. The other thing that we're looking at is how do we visualize how do we take this information that's in our database, and how do we, if we're looking at it always from I'm looking at a pool of individuals, how do I turn it around and flip the coin and look at it from a donor's perspective out at their relationship with the university? This is not something that we would relate to a donor, but this is something that if I wanted to say, show me John Doe's relationship with the university in a visual way, that's what we're trying to do. And to create what are those, what does that look like? Think about it from like a relationship mapping perspective, but also a little bit more dynamic than that. So those are the two things that we're working on next.
All right, that's a great, we have time for maybe 2 more quick questions. Maybe more, we'll see. From you or your team's perspective, was there any component of this dashboard that was particularly technically challenging within Tableau to achieve, or was it quite straightforward?
So it's interesting. So we did not show you the metrics dashboard when we talked about engagement. That was particularly challenging just from a data volume perspective, because we were looking at every prospect and creating aging criteria around every activity and holding that for every month that it transpired. So the data set becomes enormous. In this particular dashboard, on the overview screen, one of the things that's happening is that we're combining, we joke, one of the developers referred to it as fruits and vegetables. So data types, like in our data set, asks, visits, and ratings are 3 different data types. And to be able to convert them all to think of themselves as just fruits, not fruits and vegetables, or of all one data type, that conversion was a little bit more challenging than we had anticipated. But then once that was resolved, we were able to move forward.
Great analogy. You just kind of remind me of the simpler something looks and the easier and more user-friendly it is, the more complicated it gets on the back end.
Absolutely.
We have another question. Who and how many staff people build and maintain these dashboards, and how would you suggest a small shop with limited systems do this, or at least start to do this?
Okay, so that's a great question. And I want to, and again, emphasize what I mentioned at the very onset. We're fortunate. We have an amazing team of individuals that we work with. So the way our team is set up, I work really as, I would say, as the designer, architect, and user acceptance person for our dashboards. We have our IDS team, which is our reporting team, and we partner with them extensively. So we'll work with design. They'll work in terms of gathering the data and then making the magic happen around the visualizations. There is a handoff where there's a level of what I can do, and then it gets passed off to people who can do beyond that. And then even within that team, there are people, obviously, depending on the complexity of what we're trying to accomplish, it has to be moved around a little bit. So we rely on that team. And then we also have our central ITS department. We had to have extracts created for us and data tables created to support these tools that didn't exist. So we partner with them. What I would say is our team comes together. In some ways, you could argue, if you're a Marvel fan, like the Avengers, we all have our independent day responsibilities, but then these projects come along and we focus and we participate together as a team. And as I said, quite frankly, we rely on one another's unique skill sets to all add those skill sets to this desired outcome. It's not one person. It's not 2 people. It's a variety of people and it is a challenge. I mean, I wouldn't lie to you. I can sympathize that not having resources, it would be a challenge.
This is absolutely fantastic, Paul. I love your themes of intentional simplicity, reducing friction, and really it comes down to understanding what your users want to see, and also trying to compel them to do something with that information. And it's evident that they're using it. And that's the best measure of success, especially when you converted someone from a non-user to a champion.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and one of the other things that we do with our dashboards is we monitor use statistics constantly, and we look at them on a page level, and we decommission pages. So there are things that we thought when we designed this that people were going to want to see, and in reality, after 6 months, we realized that no one's viewing them, or they're being viewed very slightly. We decommission, because we don't, you know, we want to avoid that clutter. And again, we want to allow people a very clear and easy line of sight to the information that they need.
I love it. I love that maintenance of removing something. Every time I get rid of something, it's like, I don't know why it pops in my head, like an angel gets its wings. Like you get rid of a report, it's like, oh, it's gone. You don't want 5 trillion reports. Paul,
you don't.
This is fantastic. Thank you so much for presenting. I think it's been a wonderful session. I think if anyone else has any final thoughts, please put it into the chat, and I will wrap us up by doing the raffle. Yeah, I love that, Paul. All right, so this is a raffle question for a $100 gift card to the Tableau store. You know, I think you have to DM me. This is, I think, the first time we're doing it this way. So please DM me, the first person to DM me with the answer, or if no one gets it during the session, you can connect on LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest way, and just message me. And I am going to switch over to Tableau with the question. It's something that I experienced earlier this week. I was like, how do I do that? Oh yeah, there we go. All right. So we have our trusty Superstore data set, and we have total sales by segment. The question is, if I want to display this dimension at the very top, what are the steps I need to do that? So I want consumer, corporate, and home office to be displayed up here.
We're not seeing your screen.
Oh, I had the same issue. Sorry. All right. Let me try again. My apologies. All right. So we have our sales by segment. I would like this dimension displayed at the top. So I want consumer, corporate, and home office up here, which can be really handy, especially when you have dimensions that you really want to promote. So please feel free. So it's actually all of the steps that are, make sure you just DM me directly. So there's a, and we will describe this in our next session. Let me see if I can switch over to our, let's see if I can get this working. No, I have to stop and share again. There we go. All right. It's a little bit of a tough one, so this may take a little time, but it's a worthwhile tip and trick. So anyways, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Make sure you connect with us on LinkedIn. It looks like Paul provided his email. It's very kind of you. Really excited, appreciative of having you present. When we met, I was like, this is going to be good, and it was absolutely wonderful. So we're going to have a save the date coming soon. Generally, it's going to be every 3 months. So we'll be aiming 3 months from now, and we will be posting this session to our LinkedIn Advancement Tableau user group page. So you can always record it later, or sorry, see it later and share it with your colleagues, and it'll also be on YouTube. So thank you everyone for joining, and look forward to seeing you next time.